In early 2026, over 30,000 people quietly packed their bags and surrendered their keys to leave Massachusetts for good. This is not just a dry statistic from a Census Bureau report. It is the disappearance of the very people who built our neighborhoods and staffed our local businesses. What most people do not realize is that while you are hearing about a housing shortage, a silent rot is spreading through our newest developments. We have built thousands of high-end glimmering glass towers and luxury subdivisions that are sitting completely dark. But here is the real issue. These units were built for a tech elite class that has already fled to tax-friendly states.
I recently spoke with a retired couple in Metro West who have lived in their family home for 30 years. They told me they watched a new luxury lifestyle complex go up right down the street with units starting at $850,000. It has been finished for 8 months, and not a single light is on in the windows at night. The landscaping is already turning brown, and the for sale signs are starting to lean in the wind.
And this is where things get serious for every long-term homeowner in the Commonwealth. Your home value is inextricably tied to the health of the market around you. When a developer drops the price on 10 empty luxury units by $150,000 just to stop the bleeding, it pulls the floor out from under your property too. Little do people notice that the Bay State dream is being held hostage by a supply of homes that nobody wants and a demand that can no longer afford to stay. And here is the part that really deserves attention. We are seeing vacancy rates approaching 40% in newly built developments across several so-called gateway cities that were once marketed as the future of Massachusetts. These buildings are not merely sitting empty. They have become monuments to a policy failure that prioritized luxury speculation over middle-class reality.
But more importantly, this may only be the beginning of a much larger shift. If the state continues building primarily for the wealthy elite while working families continue to leave, who will remain to pay the property taxes that keep local communities functioning? Is the American dream in Massachusetts truly dying? Or are we witnessing the slow-motion collapse of a housing market that has forgotten the people who actually live here? We begin our countdown at number 10 with the city of Worcester. For years, headlines described Worcester as the rising heart of the Commonwealth and the next major technology hub. Developers rushed to construct thousands of luxury apartments near the new ballpark, with two-bedroom condominiums reaching prices of $750,000. But as we move deeper into 2026, the reality on the ground feels far less optimistic. What many people fail to realize is that the commuter-class Worcester depended on has largely remained in Boston or left the state altogether. I recently walked through one of these new developments and noticed more for-lease banners hanging outside than actual curtains in the windows. The median price for new construction in the area has already experienced a 12% reduction within the last 6 months alone. And this is where things become serious. Because when massive developments sit empty, they stop contributing to the vibrant downtown revival residents were promised. At number 9, we arrive in Lowell, the historic mill city that attempted to reinvent itself through upscale loft conversions. Developers invested heavily in the idea that young professionals would willingly pay $3,200 per month to live in renovated brick mill buildings featuring rooftop lounges and luxury amenities. But here lies the deeper problem. By 2026, the infrastructure and transportation links connecting Lowell to Boston have become so unreliable that the luxury value of the location has effectively disappeared. I recently reviewed market data showing that some of these newly renovated lofts have remained unsold for more than 180 days. What many people do not notice is that landlords are now offering 3 months of free rent and waived parking fees simply to persuade tenants to sign leases. More importantly, for retirees searching for stable and established neighborhoods, These high vacancy rates create an atmosphere that feels temporary and transient, more like a college dormitory than a true community. Next, at number 8, we have Brockton. Known as the City of Champions, Brockton launched an ambitious revitalization effort centered around luxury apartment complexes near commuter rail stations. On paper, the project appeared to represent a success story in urban planning. But in 2026, many of these buildings are facing vacancy rates approaching 15%. What most residents do not realize is that the sale-to-list ratio for new developments in Brockton has fallen to roughly 94%. This suggests that developers are becoming increasingly desperate to unload inventory before ongoing maintenance expenses consume their profit margins. I recently heard from a longtime resident who watched an entire luxury complex open directly across from his family business, only to see the security guards become the primary people entering the building for months afterward. It is a haunting image in a city that desperately needed meaningful investment rather than empty symbols of high-end speculation. At number 7, we find Lawrence. This may be one of the clearest examples of the luxury mismatch anywhere in Massachusetts. Developers erected gleaming glass towers throughout the Canal District, while surrounding communities continued struggling to afford basic necessities like groceries and utility bills. Yet many of these units are asking nearly $2,800 for a one-bedroom apartment, despite local poverty rates remaining among the highest in the state. And this is where the issue becomes serious for local taxpayers. Many of these projects receive tax incentives and development breaks under the promise that they would attract wealthy residents who would stimulate the local economy. Instead, the apartments remain empty, the tax breaks continue, and nearby businesses are still waiting for customers who never arrived. What many people fail to notice is that these vacant glass towers may actually be draining the city's economic potential rather than strengthening it. I want to ask you a serious question about the direction of our communities. If you watched a brand new luxury subdivision remain empty in your town, while your own property taxes continued rising to cover deteriorating schools and crumbling roads, how would you feel? Is the American dream in Massachusetts truly fading away? Or are local leaders continuing to build for a class of people that no longer exists? Let me know in the comments if you have seen a ghost building in your own neighborhood that everyone seems determined to ignore. Of course, not every neighborhood is experiencing these conditions equally. Some established residential areas with older and more affordable housing inventory are still holding relatively stable for the moment. But the critical issue is that this pattern of luxury rot is no longer confined to urban centers. It is now spreading into suburban communities once considered safe from these pressures. Number 6 takes us to the waterfront developments in Lynn. For years, city officials promoted the idea that a wave of luxury towers would transform Lynn into the next great coastal destination. Massive glass high-rises featuring ocean views were constructed with starting prices approaching $800,000. But as we move through 2026, the uncomfortable reality is that many of these towers remain largely dark at night. What many people do not realize is that the commuter promise has effectively collapsed. Ferry and train services have become increasingly unreliable and expensive, causing the young professionals Lynn hoped to attract to either remain in Boston or leave Massachusetts entirely. Recent market reports indicate vacancy rates near 22% in some newly constructed waterfront developments. And this is where the situation becomes serious, because when high-end buildings remain empty, they place strain on city services without generating the business activity local merchants were promised. Moving to number 5, we arrive in Fall River. This city became the center of a massive speculative bubble built around the South Coast Rail project. Developers rushed to construct so-called luxury commuter condos, based on the assumption that residents would tolerate longer commutes in exchange for lower housing prices. But in 2026, trains continue running behind schedule, housing costs remain too high, and many of these brand new developments are sitting vacant. I tracked one specific project near a future station where asking prices fell from $650,000 to $540,000 in only 4 months. What many people fail to notice is that retirees once expected to move into these communities are instead relocating across state lines into Rhode Island or New Hampshire to escape Massachusetts taxes. More importantly, for residents who chose to remain, these empty developments now stand as reminders of a commuter dream that has left the local housing market in visible decline. At number 4 on our list is Waltham, often referred to as the Watch City. For decades, this area represented one of the safest housing bets for professionals working along the Route 128 technology corridor. But the technology layoffs of 2025 and 2026 have created a massive gap in both the rental and homebuyer markets. Developers built thousands of so-called innovation lofts, with rents beginning at $4,000 per month, under the assumption that high-paying technology jobs would continue indefinitely. What most people do not realize is that one major development near the Moody Street Bridge reportedly has more than 200 units sitting vacant. Recent reports also indicate that average rents for many of these luxury lofts have already dropped by nearly $800 simply to attract tenants. And this is where things become serious, because the Watch City is now watching its own real estate foundation begin to weaken. What many residents fail to notice is that the restaurants, boutiques, and upscale businesses built to serve this innovation economy are now struggling because the high-income customer base they relied upon has largely disappeared. And this is the part that truly deserves attention. We are witnessing a complete disconnect between the types of buildings being constructed and the realities of how ordinary people are actually living. If the state continues ignoring working families and retirees, these luxury towers may eventually become some of the most expensive ghost developments in modern American history. We are now entering the top 3 cities on our list, and I have to tell you, the city holding the number 1 spot may surprise you. It is neither a major coastal destination nor an industrial powerhouse, yet its infrastructure problems have become so severe that one entire luxury subdivision has effectively been isolated from the rest of the region. You will want to stay with us until the end, because this may serve as the ultimate warning for anyone considering buying newly built property in Massachusetts today. And before we continue, do not forget to share your own ghost building stories in the comments below. I am reading every single one. Coming in at number 3 is Malden, a city once praised as the gold standard for transit-oriented development. In 2026, the skyline is increasingly dominated by what I call luxury pods, dense high-rise apartment towers built directly beside the Orange Line. Developers promised residents they could wake up in designer apartments and arrive in downtown Boston within 20 minutes. But what many people do not realize is that the convenience of the location has transformed into a daily test of endurance. Current transit data suggests that on-time performance for the Orange Line has fallen to approximately 58% this year. Yet these apartments continue charging more than $3,400 per month for one-bedroom units. And this is where things become serious for the residents themselves. Reports indicate vacancy rates near 16% in some of these new developments because many tenants have grown tired of paying premium prices for commutes that feel exhausting and unpredictable. What many people fail to notice is that developers are now offering multiple rent-free months simply to disguise the reality that the housing market has become completely disconnected from the condition of the surrounding transit infrastructure. At number 2, we arrive in Everett. Over the last several years, Everett became one of the largest speculative plays in Massachusetts real estate. Massive glass towers were constructed around the casino district under the assumption that the area would evolve into a new luxury frontier for wealthy residents. But as we walk these streets at night in 2026, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Nearly 40% of the windows in many of these luxury towers remain completely dark. But here lies the deeper issue. Many of these units originally entered the market at prices beginning around $850,000. Yet recent transactions suggest some are now selling closer to $680,000. That represents a staggering loss of equity for early buyers. What many people do not realize is that the luxury lifestyle Everett promised is increasingly being supported by temporary short-term rentals because there are not enough permanent residents to fill the buildings. More importantly, this creates additional pressure on city services, while many of these underused developments contribute far less to the local economy than expected. It has become a speculative system built entirely on the belief that someone wealthier would eventually purchase your property. But by 2026, many of those buyers have already relocated to states like Texas and Florida. I want to ask you a question that may challenge your entire understanding of growth. If your town approved the construction of a massive luxury tower that remained half empty while neighborhood roads crumbled and property taxes continued rising, who is truly benefiting from that growth? Is the Bay State dream still alive? Or are local governments simply constructing monuments for a class of people that no longer exists? Let me know in the comments whether you would ever pay $3,000 per month to live in a city where the train system barely functions consistently. Finally, we arrive at the #1 city on our list, and perhaps the clearest example of the 2026 housing trap: New Bedford. For years, the entire narrative surrounding New Bedford was built on the promise of the South Coast Rail project, which saw developers and speculators flooded into the city, constructing brand new luxury commuter subdivisions near future station sites. But here is the reality that very few people wanted to discuss behind closed doors. The rail service, which finally became operational in 2026, has proven significantly slower than originally promised. Meanwhile, a critical bridge along the route has reportedly remained under repair since 2018, creating permanent bottlenecks that turn the commute into Boston into a grueling 95-minute ordeal. Buyers purchased these newly constructed homes for nearly $750,000, believing they were investing in a brighter future. Instead, many may have purchased expensive homes in an area where the infrastructure simply cannot support the ambitions developers sold them. The numbers here are staggering. Many newly built homes within these subdivisions are now seeing price reductions approaching $155,000 as developers slowly realize that the expected commuter population never arrived. I recently saw one street where 10 identical luxury homes had been completed in late 2025, and today not a single driveway contains a parked car. What many people fail to notice is that these empty homes may now be dragging down surrounding historic neighborhoods, creating a vacuum where vibrant communities once existed. And this is where things become serious, because the property taxes residents continue paying are funding growth plans that may ultimately leave homeowners isolated while placing their equity at risk. I want to ask you a question that may challenge everything you believe about homeownership and long-term equity. If you discovered that the massive infrastructure project promoted by local officials was little more than a marketing strategy for developers, would you stay and fight for a recovery, or would you sell before the market experiences a deeper correction? I recently heard about a woman in New Bedford who sold her dream home at a loss simply to relocate to a quiet town in Maine where daily life felt manageable again. Do you think homeowners are being greedy by holding on to properties they no longer feel comfortable leaving? Or is the government being greedy by collecting taxes while delivering congestion and broken promises in return? Of course, not every neighborhood is experiencing these problems equally. Certain sections of New Bedford that continue relying on local industry rather than commuter-driven growth that are still holding relatively stable for the moment. But the larger issue is that this pattern of luxury rot is no longer isolated to individual cities. It is becoming a statewide infrastructure crisis that is finally beginning to surface across Massachusetts. The crisis unfolding across these 10 cities is not merely a real estate problem. It is the direct result of policies that prioritized high-end speculation over the infrastructure necessary to support working families and long-term residents. Massachusetts is increasingly becoming a playground for the wealthy while turning into a financial trap for middle-class residents who can no longer afford to remain in the communities they helped build. And this is where things become serious. The map has changed, and the housing frenzy of the last decade may finally be coming to an end. If you are among the thousands who have already left Massachusetts for states like Florida or Texas, was the move ultimately worth it for your peace of mind? And if you are still here trying to make things work, are you staying because you still believe in the future of the state? Or are you simply waiting for your own opportunity to leave? The reality is that retirement years are too valuable to spend staring at empty luxury towers or sitting in endless traffic caused by broken infrastructure. Please stay safe on the roads of Massachusetts, and thank you for being part of this conversation about our shared future.